when someone has kind of branded themselves around a policy issue, I think the probability of them just sort of it's tough to kind of 180 and save face at the same time. It's one thing if you made some negative comments and change your mind, but Elizabeth Warren has positioned herself as a crusader against Bitcoin, and uh, without kind of getting too speculative, there are reasons that I would be pessimistic on face about my or anyone else's ability to get through to her. I think the main thing would be read this letter, and then second is understand that there is a difference between crypto and Bitcoin, and we cannot let conversations that are adjacent to Bitcoin, right? Like whether it's stable coins, risks to the financial system, or whether it's crypto Ponzi's with like digital yams that you get like 600% APY on until all your money's gone because it was a Ponzi. Like those are problems. The latter are, and the former is a reasonable conversation to have. But I think that we are kind of on a precipice. And I don't know if I'd say this all to Elizabeth Warren, but just kind of context here. I think that we are on a sort of precipice of deciding and locking in which rights that are sort of de facto because of the legacy world do we take into the world that's like radically changed by technology. And cash is just like the obvious example of that. Like nowhere do you have a right to cash, but the sort of constitution was written in a world in which nothing other than cash realistically was conceivable, or something quite like it. um, and proposals for digital currencies are happening like now and are rolling out now, and I'm really worried about the authoritarian sort of bends of those proposals, and think an insufficient amount of public attention and thought has gone into what sort of principles and technical opportunities and limitations do we bake into a new sort of global monetary network. So yeah, it's just I think it would be, look, this is being used by tens of millions of people across the world, and that's not, you can just read these people tell you their stories. And second is that you need to think about Bitcoin differently, because when I think about our ability to have an open, permissionless, like credibly neutral monetary protocol, which are things that are kind of just, I think, should be important to people. I don't think we have a better shot at it right now than Bitcoin. Um, so yeah, this is useful for real people all over the world, and Bitcoin is not crypto. Those would be the two things I'd try to get across.
So this is interesting because we were talking before you jumped on about this. I made the claim that when we talk about a two-party system, that really we're kind of operating in a world where there are Democrats and Republicans can basically be said to be kind of the Washington Generals and the Harlem Globetrotters, and then they just switch every 4 to 8 years, and that there are it's very difficult to engage openly and honestly with these entities like Elizabeth Warren and many others on both sides of the aisle, because really the things that they are saying are not actually representative of what they believe, or effectively communicating kind of why they are representing the things that they're representing. So my question to you is this: like, how do you think about? First of all, do you agree that there is that disconnect, that someone like Elizabeth Warren is never going to engage openly and honestly with this awesome letter that you have helped put together, because really she doesn't care what it says or what the objective truth is. It's about pushing an agenda that she is specifically interested in. So what do you think about kind of that? Do you think that's true? And second, kind of, how do you, if you do, how do you engage with that and operate in a world where that's kind of what's going on?
Yeah, I don't know. Who knows? Some people are persuadable, some aren't. But I think that people in the aggregate are persuadable. Um, and I think that some of this you do to try to convince people, or educate people on that real individual level. But whether or not Elizabeth Warren is receptive to the truth about Bitcoin, I think her supporters can be. And that's ultimately like what sort of matters here. Uh, you can change someone's incentives if you change people's hearts and minds. And I just think that when more people hear stories about Bitcoin that are not just designed to make the reader hate it, which is just like most of the content that people consume about Bitcoin, that process can happen. And so I'm optimistic on public opinion on Bitcoin. Um, I don't really know many people who've spent a meaningful amount of time looking into Bitcoin that have come away from it, at the very least, not like optimistic. Uh, and thinking that this is cool and probably good. So yeah, I think over time more people will be pro Bitcoin because people will be, it'll people will be using it, right? It'll be like being pro TCP/IP. Like no one walks around with like internet protocol bumper stickers on their car. It's just like the backbone of the internet. And so I think if at least my personal prediction plays out, I think there will be a substantial increase in the number of people that are using Bitcoin in their day to day lives, whether or not they sort of see it or interact with it. And yeah, I think we have kind of this window basically where no one really knows what's happening, and there are so many sort of reasons to be scared, and you can look to sort of the this is the same stuff as like the Clipper debate in like the 90s. Like the sort of early cypherpunks were writing about the same thing. They're talking about crypto, not like cryptocurrencies, but crypto as in cryptography. And it was just really obvious, like what are the arguments against it? They're going to say that crypto enables money laundering, financial crime, that it is bad for national security. Like the world is definitely changed by innovations like cryptography and innovations like Bitcoin. It was also changed by innovations like the internet and innovations like the printing press. And some of these innovations fundamentally restructured what distribution of power between a sovereign and a people were sort of possible. It was really easy to censor information when no one could print their own. The Catholic Church in the West controlled all of what was printed and essentially all of what was said and essentially all of what was thought. And then the printing press comes, and the genie's just sort of out of the bottle. We adapt and we readjust. And of course, the people that get the printing press dropped on them when they benefited from people not being able to print their own information weren't too happy about it. But the anti-printing press moment didn't last very long because it just made the world better. And so I kind of just look at it on this like long arc of like we will probably continue to create technologies that fundamentally restructure what distributions of power are possible. And I think technologies that tend toward openness, that tend toward protecting and sort of treating everyone the same, which Bitcoin does. It's the same rules for everyone, and anyone can use it. In the same way that a printing press could be built by anyone and used by anyone, and the internet could be built and used by anyone. So, yeah, I expect the sort of anti-Bitcoin stuff to be short-lived, and who knows how it plays out. There are lots of scenarios. Don't know if we have the time to get into all of that, but yeah, I do expect this stuff to be relatively short-lived. But right now, it's just checking all of these boxes. It's like if you're a policymaker in the United States in 2022 and you hear that something is bad for the environment, that it's threatening our carbon goals, that it's horrible for national security, like yeah, and you kind of maybe believe in confidence that this sort of competes with the dollar. Um, it's kind of a recipe to be like hated by Washington. Um, I don't think it needs to be that way because I don't think that threat is real. I don't think the threat is the same as some of the critics think. It will and has restructured what is possible with money, but I don't think that's a negative thing for the United States. I think it is sort of stands in a legacy of innovations that made human flourishing like more readily available, that led to information and speech being more accessible and not controlled. And so I do just see this as like the long arc of like our speech getting freer, and our ability to share our ideas and to interact with each other regardless of physical proximity uh, uh, happening more and more, and I think that's just obviously good.